Welcome, dungeon hackers. Today we're going to take a look at a Metamagic option for sorcerers in the 2024 Player's Handbook. We're going to take a look at Twinned. Now, the Twinned Metamagic option has changed quite a bit from the 2014 version. So let's take a look at the two versions, and then we're going to take a look at each of the spells that can be used with the new version and which ones are good to use and which ones aren't. So first, the 2014 version. In 2014, it says when you cast a spell that targets only one creature and doesn't have a range of self, you can spend a number of sorcery points equal to that spell's level to target a second creature in range with the same spell. One sorcery point if the spell is a cantrip. Now in 2024, it changed, and it now says when you cast a spell such as Charm Person that can be cast with a higher level spell slot, to target an additional creature, you can spend one sorcery point to increase the spell's effective level by 1. So there's a couple of big differences in these two Metamagic options. The first one is how many sorcery points are required to twin a spell. In 2014, it costs 1 sorcery point per spell level, whereas it always costs just 1 sorcery point no matter what level the spell is in 2024. This means that depending on the level of spell, it could drastically change the amount of sorcery points you need to use. However, the 2024 version specifies it only works on spells that upcasting it would add additional targets, whereas in 2014, you could do it with any spell that targeted just one creature. So for example, Blight in 2014 does 8d8 damage to a single target. You could spend 4 sorcery points, because that's what level spell it is, to target an additional target and then do 8d8 to both targets. However, the using a higher level spell slot ability in Blight adds more damage and doesn't add more targets, so it wouldn't be eligible in 2024 to be twinned. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what spells are eligible to be twinned in 2024. We're going to take a look at these by level, and there aren't a lot. There's only 17 spells that can be twinned in 2024. So at first level, we begin with Charm Person. It says, one humanoid you can see within range makes a wisdom saving throw. It does so with advantage if you or your allies are fighting it. On a failed save, the target has the charmed condition until the spell ends or until you or your allies damage it. The charmed creature is friendly to you. When the spell ends, it knows that it was charmed. And the charmed condition says that the charmed creature can't attack the charmer or target the charmer with damaging abilities or magical effects, and the charmer has advantage on any ability check to interact with the charmed target socially. So this is just a first level spell, would require 1 sorcery point in either the 2014 or 2024 version. However, it's not a great spell to twin because you're probably not needing to charm more than one person at a time. Now, maybe there's 2 people in a shop that you want to charm in a social interaction or an exploration interaction, but in combat, all it does is mean that the charmed creature can't attack the person that cast the spell. So if you're really wanting to keep people off of you as the caster, then maybe you'd want to twin this one. However, if any of your allies do any damage to it, then the charm is broken anyway and can attack you. And even if they don't, the charmed creature is still eligible to attack all of your party members. So while Charm Person could be a very useful spell in certain situations, I don't think it's a good candidate for twinning. The next spell is the last spell in level 1, and it's Jump. Jump says, you touch a willing creature once on each of its turns until the spell ends. That creature can jump 30 feet by spending 10 feet of movement. This is a good spell for exploration and getting around obstacles and things like that. It's not super handy in combat, though there are occasions when it might be useful. But if you're trying to get the party beyond some sort of an obstacle, then casting this and twinning it still only lets you target 2 people. So a party of 5, 3 people would still have to have another way to get beyond that obstacle. Now, if you need your party to be more mobile within combat, this does increase your total movement by a total of 20 feet, so it might be useful in that situation, but overall, I don't see this as a real useful target for twinning spells either. And now we're going to move over to second level spells. This is by far the level that has the most spells that are eligible for twinning. and several of them are very good to be twinned. We're going to start off with blindness and deafness. One creature that you can see within range must succeed on a Constitution saving throw, or it has the blinded or deafened condition, your choice, for the duration. At the end of each of its turns, the target repeats the save, ending the spell on itself on a success. And the blinded condition tells us that the blinded target can't see and automatically fails any ability check that requires sight. Attack rolls against it have advantage, and its attack rolls have disadvantage. This is actually a really good condition to put on somebody in combat. I don't see this spell taken a whole lot, though I think it probably should be. Most casters are more focused on damage, but being able to take out one, or if you twin it, two targets, giving them disadvantage, and being blinded they would be unable to make opportunity attacks, can really swing the tide of battle. This, I think, is the first case where I'd say this is a great spell to twin. I would recommend more people take it and twin it. And the next second level spell is Enhance Ability. Enhance Ability says, you touch a creature and choose Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma. For the duration, the target has advantage on ability checks using the chosen ability. Now, with your limited amount of sorcery points, especially at lower levels, I don't really think that this is a great one to use. Remember, attack rolls are not ability checks, so you wouldn't have advantage on any of those. And I'm pretty sure saving throws aren't ability checks either. So correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but this would just be for skill checks essentially. And while it is possible that during exploration you may need to make a lot of skill checks, a lot of times you aren't going to know ahead of time which skill checks you need to make, and thus wouldn't know which abilities to enhance. And again, if it is something like climbing a large cliff and you want to increase your party's athletics, you can still only target 2 people with this. So the rest of the party is still on their own. I don't think this is a great spell to begin with, but it also certainly would not be a good one for twinning. However, the next spell we're looking at, Hold Person, is probably pretty good. Hold Person tells us to choose a humanoid that we can see within range. The target must succeed on a Wisdom saving throw or have the paralyzed condition for the duration. At the end of each of its turns, the target repeats the save, ending the spell on itself on a success. Now, we have talked in a previous video about how many of the humanoid creatures have been changed to different creature types and would not be an eligible target for this spell anymore. However, if you are going up against some sort of a humanoid, being able to hold it and give it the paralyzed condition, which reduces its speed to 0, and it automatically fails all strength and dexterity saving throws. Attack rolls against it have advantage, and any attack roll that hits is a critical hit if the attacker is within 5 feet. Being able to put that condition on 2 of your enemies instead of just 1 is a huge benefit. So if you are fighting humanoids, this is a great spell to use and an excellent spell to twin. And the next spell is Invisibility. Invisibility says that a creature you touch has the invisible condition until the spell ends. The spell ends early, immediately after the target makes an attack roll, deals damage, or casts a spell. If you're trying to sneak into an area, your dungeon master might give you advantage on your stealth check if you are invisible. An invisible creature isn't eligible to receive opportunity attacks because you have to see your target to attack it. So there are some instances where being invisible is very helpful. However, you still have to make a stealth check in order to sneak around, and your opponent still has a chance to know where you are. It's great to enter combat invisible, however it doesn't last very long because as soon as you attack or use a spell, you're visible again. Still, it's a pretty good choice for twinning, as the invisible condition is a very useful condition. And the next spell we have is Tasha's Mind Whip. This spell physically lashes out at one creature you can see within range. The target must make an intelligence saving throw. On a failed save, the target takes 3d6 psychic damage, and it can't take reactions until the end of its next turn. Moreover, on its next turn, it must choose whether it gets a move, an action, or a bonus action. It gets only one of the 3. On a successful save, the target takes half as much damage and suffers none of the spell's effects. Now, an interesting thing about this is that it is the only spell that can be twinned that does damage. So this is a spell where you could target multiple people and do damage to both of them. But more importantly, it can stop 2 of your opponents from being able to make opportunity attacks and severely limits them with forcing them to only take a move, an action, or a bonus action on their turn. Because of this, melee combatants either have to move into range to attack you, and then they can't attack because they've used their move, or if they're already adjacent to you can attack, but they can't move or use any kind of a bonus action. This does really limit the options that an opponent has, depending on the opponent. Because of that and the fact that it deals damage, I think this is a good option for twinning. And the last spell of second level that can be twinned is Spider Climb. Spider Climb says, until the spell ends, one willing creature you touch gains the ability to move up, down, and across vertical surfaces and along ceilings, while leaving its hands free. The target also gains a climb speed equal to its speed. This is a great one for ranged combatants during a battle, especially when fighting creatures that only have melee attacks. You can climb up to the ceiling where you're possibly out of reach of the melee attackers and just pepper them with cantrips or ranged attacks to your heart's desire, without putting yourself at any major risk. It's also an excellent spell to use during exploration to get around obstacles, get over walls, things like that. And with its 1 hour duration, this is a good one that you can cast before a battle and potentially have it last for several encounters. It's an excellent way to keep your wizards that normally have low hit points and want to hide in the back to begin with out of harm's way. Excellent choice for twinning. So this brings us to level 3. The first spell at level 3 that can be twinned is Catnap. Catnap says you make a calming gesture and up to 3 willing creatures of your choice that you can see within range fall unconscious for the spell's duration. The spell ends on a target early if it takes damage or someone uses an action to shake it or slap it awake. If a target remains unconscious for the full duration, the target gains the benefit of a short rest and it can't be affected by this spell again until it finishes a long rest. Now, the first thing to notice is that this spell targets allies, not enemies. So, it has to be a willing target. And it's important to remember that the amount of time it takes to search a room is about 10 minutes. So, this is a good spell to cast on a short rest based party member, like a warlock for example, after a battle is over while the rest of the party is searching. Now the question is, how many characters are in your party that benefit from a short rest? If you've got a couple of warlocks or just 2 characters that regain resources on a short rest, then this could be a good one to twin, because now multiple of your party members gain the benefit of the short rest. However, if your characters don't gain any real benefit other than healing from a short rest, well then you might as well just keep going, or just cast this on one character. So this could be a very useful spell to twin if you've got 2 short rest characters. However, if you don't, I would not twin this spell. The next 3rd level spell that can be twinned is Fly. Fly gives a creature, for the duration, a fly speed of 60 and it can hover. When the spell ends, the target falls if it is still aloft, unless you can stop the fall. Now we talked about this a little bit in Spider Climb, being able to be out of the way of melee combatants. But we've seen time and time again how dungeon masters will plan encounters with a 2-dimensional map in mind. And as such, when you go 3-dimensionally and fly up in the sky, you can really take advantage of the situation that the dungeon master might not have thought of. Heck, even geniuses like Khan forget to think 3-dimensionally occasionally.
He's intelligent, but not experienced. His pattern indicates 2-dimensional thinking.
This one's also real useful in travel if you need to get to the top of a cliff or over a gorge or up to the top of a castle parapet. Then it's easy to get at least 2 of your creatures up there. Now, again, the rest of the party has to have their own way to get up because you can only target 1 additional person with this. But if you have a couple people that aren't good climbers, it may be worth it. Flying is a good spell to twin. Next, we have Gaseous Form, which reads, a willing creature you touch shapeshifts along with everything it is wearing or carrying into a misty cloud for the duration. The spell ends on the target if it drops to 0 hit points or if it takes a magic action to end the spell on itself. While in this form, the target's only method of movement is a fly speed of 10 feet and it can hover. The target can enter and occupy the space of another creature. The target has resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. It has immunity to the prone condition, and it has advantage on strength, dexterity, and constitution saving throws. The target can pass through narrow openings, but it treats liquids as though they were solid surfaces. The target can't talk or manipulate objects, and any object it was carrying or holding can't be dropped, used, or otherwise interacted with. Finally, the target can't attack or cast spells. Whoa, there was a lot to that. But all of it is important to take into account when deciding whether to twin it. First of all, it does give you a fly speed, which would allow you to move around a lot. As we discussed in the previous spell, Fly, flying can be very useful. However, you only have a movement speed of 10, so you're not flying very fast. Luckily, the spell does have a 1-hour duration, so you could cover a lot of ground eventually. The next thing talks about having resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. This means that while in gaseous form, you may take a lot less damage. So if there's a reason that you don't want to take damage, other than the obvious, this is a good way to diminish the amount of damage you would take. However, you won't be able to do a lot while in that form. Now it says you can't cast spells while in this form, but it doesn't say you can't continue concentrating on a spell that was already cast. So if you target a couple of creatures that are both concentrating on a spell, you can make them gaseous form, they'll take reduced damage, and then go hide in a hole somewhere that maybe they can't be reached by the enemy, but the AoE of their spell still can. It could also be useful to get past some obstacles through portcullis gates or small cracks in the wall. So there's a lot of different ways that this one could be used. If you need to escape from something, then this would be a good one to twin. But you really have to make sure before twinning it that it's useful to the extra person that you're trying to target with it. And next we have Intellect Fortress. This is the last spell in the 3rd level range, and it says, for the duration, you or one willing creature you can see within range has resistance to psychic damage, as well as advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. So having resistance to psychic damage and advantage on those saving throws is very useful, but only in certain circumstances. If you aren't fighting something that has psychic damage or is forcing you to make those kinds of saving throws, then it wouldn't be super useful. However, if you are, say, fighting a Mind Flayer, this would be an excellent spell to have on your party members, and the more you can put it on, the better. So if you need it, this is a great one to twin. And if your party was smart enough to scout out in advance, then you might know what you're going up against and know that it uses psychic damage or causes you to make those kinds of saves. So remember, it's always important to look ahead and be ready. Now we're on to 4th level. We're getting to a point where twinning these spells in 2014 would have cost you a lot of sorcery points, where it only costs 1 now. However, we're also getting to a point where there's very few spells left that you can twin. The first one we're going to talk about is Banishment. This 4th level spell says one creature that you can see within range must succeed on a charisma saving throw or be transported to a harmless demiplane for the duration. While it's there, the target has the incapacitated condition. When the spell ends, the target reappears in the space it left, or in the nearest unoccupied space if that space is occupied. If the target is an aberration, a celestial, an elemental, a fiend, or a fae, the target doesn't return if the spell lasts for 1 minute. The target is instead transported to a random location on a plane, DM's choice, associated with its creature type. So we're going to look at the end of the spell first. If the creature is an aberration, a celestial, an elemental, a fae, or a fiend, and the spell lasts for a full minute, then they stay there. However, there's a couple problems with this. While we know that a lot more creatures have been changed into those creature types based on some previous videos, for them to be stuck there permanently, they would have to fail all their saving throws for a full minute. That's 10 rounds of saving throws that they'd have to fail. And I find it pretty unlikely that they would fail 10 saving throws in a row. I really don't think that this part of the spell is going to come into play very much at all. However, being able to take a creature out of combat for an entire round is pretty useful. It allows you to concentrate on other creatures in the combat, maybe take out a few, so that when the banished creature comes back, it's easier to deal with. And with that in mind, it would be even more useful to get rid of 2 of them, especially with it only costing 1 sorcery point to target a second one. The other little tidbit here is that while they're transported to the demiplane, they're incapacitated, and an incapacitated creature can't concentrate on spells or abilities that are active. So if there's a caster on the other team, or two, that have effects up that are hurting your party, you can transport them to this demiplane where they'll be incapacitated, lose concentration, you can clean up their minions, and then when they come back, you can deal with them then. This is a really good spell, just like Hold Person was at 2nd level, to be able to twin and target more than one creature with. And the second and last 4th level spell is Charm Monster. Charm Monster says one creature you can see within range makes a Wisdom saving throw. It does so with advantage if you or your allies are fighting it. On a failed save, the target has the charmed condition until the spell ends, or until you or your allies damage it. The charmed creature is friendly to you. When the spell ends, the target knows it was charmed by you. This is pretty much the same as Charm Person, as we discussed before, and the same thing applies. It is fairly limited how useful it would be in combat. However, in the right circumstances, it could be useful to twin this one. In general, I wouldn't think that this would be a spell you would find the right circumstances to want to twin, but I could be wrong. If you disagree with me on any of my takes on these spells and which one should be twinned, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. But while you're typing that up, go ahead and listen to the only spell in level 5, Hold Monster. Hold Monster says, choose a creature that you can see within range. The target must succeed on a Wisdom saving throw or have the paralyzed condition for the duration. At the end of each of its turns, the target repeats the save, ending the spell on itself on a success. Again, just like with Charm Monster, Hold Monster is very similar to the earlier level spell, Hold Person. It's a very useful spell to use against your opponents in combat. It's even more useful if you can target 2. So while Charm Monster is one that I don't think you would use very often, I can see Hold Monster being something that you could twin and really get a lot of bang for your buck. So this is a good one to twin. And then next we have our 6th level entry, Chain Lightning. Chain Lightning says you launch a lightning bolt toward a target you can see within range. 3 bolts then leap from the target to as many as 3 other targets of your choice, each of which must be within 30 feet of the first target. A target can be a creature or an object and can be targeted by only one of the bolts. Each target makes a dexterity saving throw, taking 10d8 lightning damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. Using a higher level spell slot, 1 additional bolt leaps from the first target to another target for each spell level above 6th. Now, this is the first time I actually read to you what using a higher spell slot says, because this one you might need your dungeon master to agree to. I would certainly talk with them before you try it. The twinning Metamagic says that when upcasting would target an additional creature. However, this spell doesn't say it targets an additional creature, it says it creates another bolt, which essentially is the same thing, and I feel like surely your dungeon master would allow that. However, the wording is a little different, so I could understand if somebody would say no. I'd ask your dungeon master just like I'm going to ask mine.
Yes, I approve.
Thanks, DM. And lastly, we have the level 7 spell, Etherealness. Etherealness states, you step into the border region of the ethereal plane where it overlaps with the current plane. You remain in the border ethereal for the duration. During this time, you can move in any direction. If you move up or down, every foot of movement costs an extra foot. You can perceive the plane you left, which looks gray, and you can't see anything there more than 60 feet away. While on the ethereal plane, you can affect and be affected only by creatures, objects, and effects on that plane. Creatures that aren't on the ethereal plane can't perceive or interact with you unless a feature gives them the ability to do so. When the spell ends, you return to the plane you left in the spot that corresponds to your spot in the border ethereal. If you appear in an occupied spot, you are shunted to the nearest unoccupied spot and take force damage equal twice the number of feet that you were moved. The spell ends instantly if you cast it while you are on the ethereal plane or a plane that doesn't border it, such as one of the outer planes. Using a higher level spell slot, you can target up to 3 willing creatures, including yourself, for each spell slot above 7th. So again, this is yet another instance where it doesn't say that upcasting targets a creature, it targets 3. So again, make sure with your dungeon master that this is okay. However, Twinning this would give you 3 more targets instead of just 1, which is why they might not go for it. But it allows you to get probably most of your party most of the time, and it would allow for escaping from some place that you can't get out of, getting through portcullises, getting yourself out of combat in a pinch, as nothing can follow you. It's great for traveling, as you can scout out the entire dungeon before you go actually into it physically. So there's lots of reasons to use etherealness, and there's a lot of reasons you might want to apply it to extra people. So this one would also be a pretty good spell to use your twin spell on if you need to get multiple people ethereal. And now we do have 2 more spells that are only available to certain subclasses. So we didn't list them up above. However, if you are of the clockwork subclass, you would get freedom of movement. Freedom of movement says you touch a willing creature for the duration. The target's movement is unaffected by difficult terrain, and spells and other magical effects can neither reduce the target's speed nor cause the target to have the paralyzed or restrained condition. The target also has a swim speed equal to its speed. In addition, the target can spend 5 feet of movement to automatically escape from non-magical restraints, such as manacles or a creature imposing the grappled condition on it. Now, as we talked about earlier, on how debilitating the paralyzed condition can be, this would be a good one for avoiding that condition. If you know you're going to go up to some sort of encounter where the players might be restrained or grappled or paralyzed, then this is a pretty good one to cast. And it's not concentration, and it lasts for an hour, so you may be able to get multiple battles out of it. Throwing this on your tanks that are going to be up front fighting helps keep them in the fight and protecting those of you in the back that are doing things like casting freedom of movement, for example. This is a pretty good one to twin if you have multiple targets that would need this, or if you have targets that get hit by something that paralyzes them, then this would cause that condition to go away. And the last one is for draconic sorcerers who can take the command spell. The command spell says you speak a 1-word command to a creature you can see within range. The target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or follow the command on its next turn. Choose the command from these options. Approach, the target moves towards you. Drop, the target drops whatever it is holding. Flee, the target spends its turn moving away from you. Grovel, the target has the prone condition. And a halt, on its turn, the target doesn't move and takes no action or bonus action. Now those are some pretty powerful effects to be able to apply to a creature with just a first level spell, and being able to apply those effects to 2 creatures is even more powerful. While this isn't as powerful as a lot of things, it does give you a lot of options of different things you can do. Forcing movement when there are dangerous, hazardous conditions around, like fire or pits, things like that, can really change the tide of battle. Forcing them to drop prone or just halt in place and not do anything are both very beneficial to the rest of your party. This would also be a good one to twin. So those are all the spells that can be twinned in the 2024 version of Dungeons & Dragons. While there's way fewer options to choose from than there was previously, it's way less expensive to twin stuff, meaning that you'll have more sorcery points available to do other things or to twin even more spells. So you get a little more bang for your buck in this new version. However, like I said, you have fewer options with which to do it. So the question is, are any of these spells good enough to want you to take the twin metamagic? Now I would say yes, the twin metamagic is still very useful. If you're primarily focused on doing damage, it might not be for you. But if you are more focused in battlefield control, or at least willing to mix and match a little, then the applications of the twin metamagic towards some of the crowd control type spells is very, very useful. I would still mark this as one of the best metamagics to take. However, I am a little biased. I tend to play control characters over damage characters anyway. The bottom line is to make sure that when you choose to twin a spell, that it is a useful spell to twin. You don't want to use your sorcery points for a little bit of a benefit. You want to make sure that all your sorcery points make a big difference in the battle. And there's a lot of spells with which you can do that in here. So let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. Like and subscribe and hit the notification bell and all that other stuff. And until our next video, just remember to keep on hacking the dungeon.